The air in first class was thick with entitlement and the scent of pre-departure champagne. But for the Thorne family, it was about to become toxic. They were a respected doctor and a loving father, taking their children on a dream vacation. But in the eyes of one flight attendant and a disgruntled passenger, they were a threat. The order was given. Remove them. They were minutes from being arrested, humiliated in front of the entire plane. But what the captain didn't know, as he marched from the cockpit to lay down the law, was that the man he was about to accuse of being a security risk was the deputy director of the FBI. The Globalis Air flagship lounge at JFK's Terminal 8 was a sea of muted greys, brushed steel, and the self-important murmur of the elite. It was a Tuesday in April, and the lounge was buzzing with the energy of people heading for the evening bank of European departures. Among them, the Thorne family was an island of genuine, quiet excitement. Marcus Thorne, a man whose calm demeanor was his default, sipped a lukewarm coffee. He wore a simple, well-tailored navy blazer, dark jeans, and a plain grey t-shirt, the off-duty uniform of a man who spent his weekdays in bespoke suits. He watched his 8-year-old daughter, Zoe, meticulously colouring in a London-themed colouring book. Her tongue was stuck out in concentration. Beside him, his wife, Dr. Aaliyah Thorne, a respected pediatric oncologist, was scrolling through emails on her phone, a small frown on her face as she coordinated patient handoffs. "Okay," she finally sighed, locking the screen. "I'm officially on vacation." "About time," Marcus smiled, reaching over to squeeze her hand. Their 15-year-old son, Jamal, was plugged into his headphones, his head nodding slightly to a beat only he could hear, his lanky frame slouched in the designer lounge chair. He was in that teenage phase where cool was a shield, but Marcus could see the excitement thrumming beneath it. It was their first family trip to Europe in 3 years. The fragile peace was first pricked, not broken by a woman sitting opposite them. Her name was Carolyn Vance. She was in her late 50s, draped in a beige cashmere wrap that probably cost more than their flights, and her face was pulled into a tight mask of disapproval. She had been sighing loudly for 10 minutes, her gaze flicking between her Rolex and Zoe. Zoe, oblivious, dropped a green crayon. It rolled innocently toward Mrs. Vance's pristine white carry-on bag. "Zoe, honey, pick that up," Aaliyah said, already leaning over. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Caroline Vance snapped, not to Aaliyah, but to the man next to her, presumably her husband. "Can't they control their children? This is supposed to be a premium lounge." Aaliyah stiffened. Marcus put a calming hand on her arm. "Zoe, come here," he said, his voice even. Zoe scrambled over, her lip trembling slightly, green crayon in hand. "She just dropped a crayon, Carolyn," her husband, a weary-looking man named Philip, mumbled. "It's the principal, Philip. They run wild." Marcus met Caroline Vance's eyes across the seating area. He didn't glower. He simply looked. His gaze was steady, analytical, and utterly flat. It was a look that, in other professional contexts, had made hardened men break into a cold sweat. Mrs. Vance, to her credit, held it for a second before huffing and turning away, fanning herself with a copy of Vogue. "Don't let her bother you," Marcus murmured to Aaliyah. "People like her," Aaliyah whispered back, her voice tight, "are the reason I need a vacation." Soon, the call for Flight 104 to London, Heathrow, was announced. The Thornes gathered their belongings, Marcus handling the larger carry-ons, Aaliyah managing Zoe, and Jamal slinging his own backpack over his shoulder. They boarded the Boeing 777 and turned left into the first-class cabin. Their seats were the private pods in the center, 1D, 1G, 2D, and 2G. As they settled, they saw Caroline Vance and her husband were in 1A and 1B, the window seats just ahead and to the left. The flight attendant for their section approached. His name tag read Gregory. He was tall, with sharp features and a smile that seemed painted on. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance," Gregory gushed. "So wonderful to have you back on Globalis. Can I get you your usual pre-departure glass of Duval Leroy?" "Yes, Gregory." "Thank you," Caroline said, already relaxing into her seat. And quickly, that lounge was a zoo. Gregory then turned to the Thorns. The 1,000-watt smile dimmed to a low-watt bulb. "Can I take your coats?" he asked, his tone clipped and formal. "Yes, thank you," Aaliyah replied, handing him her jacket and Marcus's blazer. Jamal was trying to lift his heavy backpack into the overhead bin. He was tall but thin, and the bag was awkwardly weighted. "Can I help you with that, sir?" Gregory asked, his voice dripping with what could only be described as impatient tolerance. "I got it," Jamal mumbled, embarrassed. He gave it one more heave, and it slid into place, but the edge of it brushed the padded cabin wall. "Sir, please be careful," Gregory snapped. "This is a brand new interior." "It's fine, I got it," Jamal said, flushing red and sinking into his pod. Marcus watched the interaction. He recognized the type. Gregory wasn't just a flight attendant, he was a gatekeeper. He saw first class not as a service he provided, but as a club he curated. And in his eyes, the Thorn family didn't quite belong. "Excuse me," Aaliyah said, holding up a small sealed water bottle. "My daughter has a slight allergy, and this is her specific water. Is it okay for her to drink this before takeoff?" Gregory looked at the bottle as if it were a biohazard. "FAA regulations state all drinks must be served by us. I can bring her one of our sealed waters." "I understand," Aaliyah said, maintaining her professional, calm, doctor voice. "But this is distilled and purified in a specific way. It's medically necessary. I can show you the doctor's note. It's in my bag." Gregory let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine. But she must be finished with it before we push back." He didn't wait for a thank you, turning on his heel and gliding back to the galley. "Wow," Jamal muttered, pulling one earbud out. "He's a jerk." "He's just doing his job, Jamal," Marcus said quietly. "Let's just settle in." But as Marcus looked across the aisle, he saw Gregory in the galley, whispering to another flight attendant. Both of them glanced over at the Thorn family. Gregory was animated, shaking his head. Then, from 1A, Caroline Vance's voice cut through the cabin's quiet. "Gregory, dear, my champagne." "Right away, Mrs. Vance," he called, his smile instantly snapping back into place. The cabin door was still open. The last of the passengers were boarding. Marcus Thorn felt a small, tight knot in his stomach. It was the same feeling he got just before an operation went live. Something was wrong. Boarding was complete. The captain's voice, a gravelly, confident baritone, came over the PA system, welcoming everyone aboard, announcing a flight time of 6 hours and 40 minutes, and promising a smooth ride over the Atlantic. The cabin crew, he said, was the best in the business. In the first-class cabin, Gregory Slater was proving that statement false. He moved with an exaggerated, theatrical grace, serving the Vances and another older couple in 3A and 3B with effusive charm. When he got to the Thorns, his professionalism was brittle. "Pre-departure beverages?" he asked, his tray already half empty. "I'll have an orange juice, please," Aaliyah said. "And you, sir?" he asked Marcus. "Just water, thank you." "And for the children?" "He's 15, Marcus said, his voice still level. "Jamal, what would you like?" "Just a Coke," Jamal said, not looking up from his phone. "I'll have an apple juice," Zoe chirped, holding up her coloring book. "Look, I finished Big Ben," Gregory offered a paper-thin smile. Lovely. He handed out the drinks and disappeared. The tension, however, did not. Marcus could feel Caroline Vance's eyes on them. She was whispering animatedly to her husband, Philip, who just looked like he wanted to go to sleep. The incident, when it came, was so small, so utterly mundane, that it was absurd. Jamal, settling into his pod, had his phone plugged into the seat's USB port with the cable draped across the small console. As Gregory passed by to collect empty glasses, his hip snagged the cable, pulling Jamal's phone off the console. It clattered to the floor. "Ugh, really?" Gregory hissed, spinning around. "Sir, you need to keep your belongings secured. You just tripped me." "You snagged my cable," Jamal retorted, his teenage indignation flaring. "It was in my space." "You are creating a hazard in the aisle," Gregory said, his voice rising. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. "It wasn't in the aisle," Jamal shot back. "It was right here." "Jamal," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "Pick up your phone. Apologize." Jamal looked at his father, betrayed. "But I didn't." "Jamal, now!" Jamal sighed, unbuckled, and retrieved his phone. "Sorry," he muttered, not meaning it. Gregory smirked, a tiny victorious twitch of his lips. "See that you stow it properly." But Caroline Vance wasn't going to let the moment pass. She unbuckled her own seatbelt and stood up, marching the 2 steps back to where Gregory stood. "Gregory," she said, in a loud stage whisper that carried through the entire cabin. "That boy was incredibly rude to you, and I have to be honest, I am not comfortable." Gregory's eyes lit up. He had an ally. "Mom?" "This whole family. They've been disruptive since the lounge, and just now, when you corrected the boy, the father," she gestured at Marcus, "he glared at me. It was threatening. I felt threatened." This was a blatant lie. Marcus hadn't even looked at her. He had been focused entirely on his son. Aaliyah, overhearing this, unbuckled. "Excuse me? What are you talking about? My husband did not look at you, and my son did nothing wrong." "See?" Caroline shrieked, pointing at Aaliyah. "Now she's yelling at me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. They're aggressive. I don't feel safe flying with them." The cabin, which had been a quiet cocoon of pre-flight relaxation, was now silent, all eyes on the confrontation. Gregory Slater drew himself up to his full height. He had his justification. "Ma'am," he said to Aaliyah, "I need you to return to your seat and lower your voice." "I am not lowering my voice," Aaliyah said, her own anger, the righteous anger of a mother and wife being unjustly accused, finally breaking through. "You are allowing this passenger to slander my family. This is harassment." "You are creating a disturbance," Gregory said, the words coming out like rehearsed lines. "If you cannot calm down, you will be in violation of federal air regulations." Marcus stood up. He was taller than Gregory, but he didn't crowd him. He simply occupied the space. "Flight attendant," he said, and his voice was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, it was chilling. "My wife is not creating a disturbance. She is reacting to one. That passenger," he nodded at Caroline, "has just filed a false report, and you are escalating a situation you created. Stand down." The command, "Stand down," hung in the air. It was not a request. For a half-second, Gregory's bravado wavered. He saw something in Marcus's eyes that wasn't anger. It was authority. But Caroline Vance was behind him, a Greek chorus of entitlement. "He's threatening you now, Gregory. Look at him. He's posturing. I want them off this plane. I am a globalist million-miler, and I demand you remove this threat." Gregory's resolve hardened. He had his whale, his high-status passenger, backing him. He made the calculation. "Sir," Gregory said to Marcus, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "You are being belligerent. You've threatened a passenger, and now me. I am notifying the captain. We will be returning to the gate. You and your family will be removed from this flight." "You are making a catastrophic mistake," Marcus said, his voice still deadly quiet. "The only mistake," Gregory sneered, "was letting you on board." He turned and strode toward the cockpit, a man on a mission, high on his own perceived power. Zoe started to cry. "Daddy, what's happening? Are we going home?" Jamal was filming the entire thing on his phone, his face pale but furious. Aaliyah sat down, her hands trembling with rage. "Marcus, what is this?" "This," Marcus said, rubbing his temples, "is a problem." He looked out the window. The jet bridge was, in fact, still attached. They hadn't pushed back. A new voice, sharp and bureaucratic, entered the cabin. A woman in a Globalis ground uniform, her name tag reading Susan Jenkins, head gate agent, marched into the cabin, iPad in hand, flanked by the first officer. "Mr. and Mrs. Thorne," Susan Jenkins said, her voice loud and projecting. "I'm Susan Jenkins, the station manager. I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and deplane. Immediately." The humiliation was a physical thing. It was a hot, sour wave that washed over the Thorne family. Every other passenger in first and business class was staring, some with pity, some with annoyance at the delay, some with undisguised suspicion. "On what grounds?" Aaliyah demanded, her voice shaking but strong. She had stood up to hospital boards and grieving parents. She would not be cowed by a gate agent. Susan Jenkins, a woman who clearly dealt with unruly passengers for a living, had her no-nonsense face on. "We have multiple reports, from both a passenger and our lead flight attendant, of disruptive, aggressive, and threatening behavior from your party. This flight's security is our paramount concern. We are not going to debate this. Please take your bags and come with me." "This is absurd," Aaliyah said. "We were sitting here. My children were quiet. Your flight attendant snagged my son's cable. And that passenger," she pointed at Caroline Vance, who was now sitting with her arms crossed, looking smug, "lied and said we threatened her. This is racial profiling." The moment Aaliyah said, "racial profiling," Susan Jenkins's expression tightened. That was the magic word that moved this from a customer service issue to a legal one. But Gregory Slater, standing behind her, was quick to cover. "They're just saying that to cause trouble," Gregory interjected. "The wife was yelling. The husband stood up and got in my face. I felt physically threatened. He," Gregory pointed at Marcus, "is a security risk." The first officer, a younger man named Benning, looked uncomfortable but held his position, a silent, uniformed wall. "This is your final warning," Susan said, her voice hardening. "This is a federally regulated space. If you do not deplane voluntarily, I will be forced to call the Port Authority police to have you removed. You will be arrested for trespassing and interfering with a flight crew. Do you understand me?" This was the precipice. Zoe was now sobbing openly, burying her face in Aaliyah's side. "I want to go home, Mummy. I don't like it." Jamal had his phone held high, recording everything. "This is crazy," he said, his voice cracking. "We didn't do anything. You're kicking us off because she lied?" "Put that camera away," Susan snapped at him. "It's my right," Jamal said. "Marcus," Aaliyah whispered, her hand finding his. "Marcus, just let's go. It's not worth this. We'll get the next flight. I will not be arrested in front of my children." Marcus looked at his wife's face, her pride and her pain. He looked at Zoe, terrified. He looked at Jamal, trying to be brave. And he looked at Gregory Slater, who was smiling, a small, triumphant smile. He then looked at Susan Jenkins, at the first officer, and at Caroline Vance, who was now sipping her champagne again. And something in him, a deep, cold reservoir of professional duty that he kept walled off from his family life, finally breached the dam. He was not Marcus Thorne, husband and father, on vacation. He was Deputy Director Thorne. "No," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the cabin's air-conditioning hum. Susan Jenkins's eyes widened. "What did you say?" "We are not leaving this aircraft," Marcus said, his posture changing. He wasn't belligerent. He was precise. "You have threatened to have me, a ticketed passenger, arrested based on a false report from a passenger and a biased, unsubstantiated claim from your crew. You have not conducted an investigation. You have not interviewed a single other passenger. You have threatened my family and terrified my child." "Sir, I'm not going to argue," Susan began, pulling out her radio. "I'm calling Port Authority." "Do it," Marcus said. "I'll wait. But before you do, you're going to do one more thing. I am done taking orders from you." "That wasn't a request," Marcus said. "I am demanding to speak to the captain in command. Not your first officer, not you, the captain. Now." There was something in his tone, the absolute, unshakable certainty. It stopped Susan cold, her hand hovering over her radio. "Captain Macmillan is busy," the first officer spoke up. "He's preparing for departure. I'm acting on his authority." "Then you can tell Captain Macmillan," Marcus said, "that if he does not come out of that cockpit and speak to me, this aircraft will not be going to London. It will be grounded, here, at this gate, as part of a federal investigation." This was a new level. The first officer and Susan Jenkins exchanged a nervous look. "Federal investigation? Who do you think you are?" Susan scoffed, but the bravado was gone. "He's just bluffing," Gregory insisted, his face getting red. "He's threatening the plane now. Call the cops." "Go get him," Marcus said to the first officer, ignoring Gregory. "Tell him he has 60 seconds to de-escalate a situation his crew created, or I will de-escalate it for him. Tell him my name is Marcus Thorne. He'll want to take this meeting." The first officer, clearly out of his depth, made a decision. He nodded curtly and disappeared back into the cockpit. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the air vents. Caroline Vance had stopped sipping her champagne. Gregory Slater looked like a balloon that had been pricked. Susan Jenkins was chewing her lip, her radio forgotten. A moment later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Davis Macmillan emerged. He was a man in his late 50s, with greying hair and an immaculate uniform. His face was a thundercloud. He was annoyed at the delay, annoyed at his crew, and annoyed at these passengers. "All right, what in the hell is going on here?" Captain Macmillan boomed, striding into the cabin. "I have a $30 million aircraft, 200 passengers, and a takeoff slot I'm about to lose. Why are these people still on my plane?" Captain Macmillan was the undisputed king of his domain. His word was law. He surveyed the scene with an air of pure, unadulterated command. He saw a gate agent, his first officer, his lead flight attendant, and a black family. In his mind, the math was simple. "Captain," Gregory Slater said, rushing to his side. "Thank God. This passenger, Mr. Thorne, has been belligerent and aggressive. He threatened Mrs. Vance in 1A, he got in my face, and his family has been disruptive. He's a security risk. I've ordered them to be removed, but they are refusing. He threatened me. He did," Caroline Vance chimed in from her seat. "I was terrified. He was muttering about taking control, and people like me." This was a new, dangerous escalation. Taking control was terminology that would ground a plane. Captain Macmillan's eyes narrowed on Marcus. He didn't see a father. He saw a problem, a threat to his flight. "Sir," Captain Macmillan said, his voice flat and final, "I am Captain Davis Macmillan. This is my aircraft, and my authority is absolute. I don't know what your problem is, and frankly, I don't care. I have a report from my crew and a passenger that you are a threat. I am ordering you and your family to deplane. Now, do it quietly, and we can sort this out on the ground. Refuse, and you'll be carried off in cuffs." Aaliyah gasped. Zoe was crying harder. Jamal's phone was still pointed directly at the captain. Marcus Thorne looked at the captain. He took a slow, deliberate breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a sudden move. He simply stood in his small pod space, and for the first time let the full weight of his identity enter the room. "Captain Macmillan," Marcus said. His voice was different now. It was the voice he used in the secure briefing rooms in the J. Edgar Hoover building. It was a voice that did not plead, did not argue. It stated facts. "I am going to say this one time. My name is Marcus Thorne. My family and I are on a personal vacation. We have been harassed by that passenger," he nodded to Caroline, "and by your flight attendant, Mr. Slater. We have done nothing wrong. The only security risk on this flight is your crew member, who has escalated a non-existent situation, and that passenger who has just filed a false report to a flight crew, which I'm sure you know," he paused, "is a federal offense." The captain's face darkened. "You don't get to quote the law at me, son. You've got 10 seconds. "Captain," Marcus said, "I am not your son." He slowly reached inside his navy blazer. Instantly, the first officer tensed, his hand moving to his side as if he could do something. Gregory Slater actually took a step back. "Stand easy, Mr. Benning," Marcus said, not even looking at the first officer. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a black, bifold leather wallet. He flipped it open. Inside, on one side, was a gold badge. On the other, a laminated identification card. He held it up for Captain Macmillan to see. "Captain Davis Macmillan," Marcus repeated, his voice like ice. "My name is Deputy Director Marcus Thorne. I am the Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Counter-Terrorism Division." He held the credentials steady. The photo on the ID was unmistakably him, though his expression was harder. The gold badge shone under the cabin's soft lighting. "Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice." The effect was instantaneous. It was as if a stun grenade had gone off in the cabin, replacing all noise with a ringing silence. Captain Macmillan froze. His face, which had been ruddy with anger, drained of all color. His jaw went slack. His eyes darted from the badge to Marcus's face, to the badge again, as if his brain could not process the information. He wasn't looking at a passenger. He was looking at one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the United States. He had just threatened to arrest the Deputy Director of the Counter-Terrorism Division. His flight attendant had just accused an FBI director of being a terrorist. The silence stretched for 5, 10, 15 seconds. Captain Macmillan's entire body was rigid. He was a statue. His internal monologue was a high-pitched scream. "I'm fired. I'm not just fired. I'm going to jail. My license is gone. My pension is gone. This airline, oh my God. Globalis is..." Gregory Slater, who was peering over the captain's shoulder, saw the badge. His face turned a sickly, pale green. He looked like he was going to be physically sick, right there on the premium cabin carpet. Caroline Vance, from her seat, couldn't see the badge, only the captain's reaction. "Well," she demanded, "get them off." Captain Macmillan's head swiveled toward her. The look in his eyes was no longer annoyance. It was pure, unadulterated fury. But it wasn't for Marcus. It was for her, and for Gregory. He finally found his voice. It came out as a strangled whisper. "Mr. Slater." "Yes, Captain," Gregory stammered. "Ms. Jenkins." "Captain," Susan squeaked. "Into the forward galley, now." The boom was back, but it was laced with sheer panic. He turned back to Marcus. His hands were visibly shaking. He, a veteran pilot who had landed in typhoons, was terrified. "Director, Thorne," he said, the title feeling alien and sharp on his tongue. "Sir, my profound apologies. Please take your seat. Mr. Benning, get the director, get his family, whatever they want. Champagne, water, anything." Marcus Thorne did not smile. He simply held the captain's gaze. He did not put his badge away. "Captain," Marcus said, "all I want is for you to get this aircraft to London, safely, with my family on board." "Yes, sir." "Of course, sir." "Right away," Macmillan stammered. He then turned and all but ran into the galley, pulling the curtain shut with a violent zip. The cabin was left in the stunned, ringing silence of his wake. Jamal, his phone still recording, whispered, "Holy shit, Dad." Marcus finally, slowly, closed his credentials and put them back in his jacket pocket. He sat down and buckled his seatbelt. "Language, Jamal," he said. The forward galley of a Boeing 777 is a small, cramped space filled with stainless steel carts and canisters. With Captain Macmillan, First Officer Benning, Gregory Slater, and Susan Jenkins crammed inside, it felt like a pressurized coffin. The second the curtain was zipped shut, Captain Macmillan exploded. "Are you insane?" he roared, his voice low but vibrating with such rage that Gregory flinched. "Do you have any idea who you just tried to kick off my aircraft?" "Captain, he was being aggressive. Mrs. Vance said," Gregory began, his voice a reedy whine. "Mrs. Vance is an idiot." Macmillan slammed his hand against a metal cart, making the glasses rattle. You are trained crew. You accused the FBI Deputy Director of Counterterrorism of being a security risk. Are you trying to end this airline? Are you trying to have my license revoked? We are seconds away from having this entire aircraft impounded as a crime scene for interfering with a federal officer." Susan Jenkins was white-faced. "Captain, I was just following procedure. He was refusing to deplane." "Procedure?" Macmillan laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Your procedure just threatened a man who could have every one of us and our CEO on a no-fly list by breakfast, a man who investigates actual terrorists. And you, he jabbed a finger in Gregory's chest. "You picked a fight with him over a phone cable? Because your pet passenger in 1A didn't like the look of his family?" I didn't. It wasn't about that," Gregory stammered. "Oh, save it, Slater," Macmillan seethed. "I know exactly what it was about. I've seen you do it before, with the passengers you don't think belong. You're a snob and a liability. But this time, you picked the one man on this continent you can't bully." He turned to Susan. "And you threatened him with arrest. You should have de-escalated. You should have investigated. You took the word of a known high-maintenance passenger and a flight attendant with a history of complaints. You're as much to blame as he is." "Captain," the First Officer Benning finally spoke, his voice quiet. What do we do?" Macmillan took a deep breath, visibly trying to get his heart rate under control. He was in survival mode. His career, his airline's reputation, all of it was hanging by a thread held by the man in seat 1D. "Here is what is going to happen," Macmillan said, his voice now cold and precise. "Susan, you are going back to the gate. You are going to sign off on the manifest. You are going to act as if this was a minor seating issue that has been resolved. You are going to file a report, and in it you will state that you made an error in judgment. Do you understand?"
"Yes, Captain," she whispered.
"Gregory," he turned, "you have two choices. Choice 1, you deplane right now. You will be met by corporate security, and, I assume, federal liaisons when they arrive. You will be fired before this plane reaches cruising altitude. Choice 2, you go back out into that cabin. You will work this flight. You will be a ghost. You will not speak to the Thorne family, unless they speak to you, at which point you will be the most polite, obsequious, and professional flight attendant in the history of aviation. You will personally and sincerely apologize to Director Thorne and his wife. And when we land at Heathrow, then you will be met by security. Your fate is sealed, but this will at least mitigate the damage to the company. What's it going to be?" Gregory Slater looked as though his world had ended. I'll work the flight, Captain." "Good. Now get out. Benning, you're with me." Gregory and Susan scurried out of the galley. Macmillan took another second, wiped his sweaty palms on his trousers, and straightened his tie. He pulled the curtain back. He stepped into the cabin and walked directly to seat 1A. Caroline Vance looked up at him, her "I'm with you" smile ready. "Captain," she began, "I'm so glad you handled that. I will be writing a letter to corporate commending you." "Ma'am," Macmillan cut her off, his voice dead. "I need to inform you of something. The man you just accused of being a threat is FBI Deputy Director Thorne, the man in charge of—" "Well, I'm sure you can guess." Caroline's face went from smug to horrified. "FBI, but I must have misheard him." "I'm sure I just misheard what he said." "I'm sure you did," Macmillan said, his eyes filled with contempt. "I should also inform you that filing a false report to a flight crew, one that causes a security delay, is a federal offense, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. I have chosen not to have you removed. The director has, graciously, chosen not to press the issue. I would strongly advise you to put your noise-cancelling headphones on, turn on a movie, and not speak again for the entire duration of this flight. Am I clear?" Caroline Vance, for perhaps the first time in her adult life, was speechless. She just nodded, her face ashen. Macmillan then turned and walked the final few steps to Marcus's seat. He stood in the aisle, but he was no longer king. He looked like a man begging for his life. "Director Thorne, Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice just loud enough for them to hear. I have no words. I cannot express my apologies for the breakdown in professionalism you and your family experienced. The behavior of my crew was inexcusable. It was a failure on my part, as captain, for not investigating before I spoke. I am profoundly, deeply sorry." Marcus looked at him. "Your flight attendant, Gregory? He will be apologizing to you personally, sir, and his actions are being reviewed. At the highest level." "I see. Is there anything at all I can do for you? For your family?" "Yes," Aaliyah spoke up, her voice icy. "You can ensure my daughter, who is 8, understands that the plane police are not coming to take her daddy away. She's terrified." Macmillan winced, as if he'd been struck. He crouched down, wincing at his knees, to get on Zoe's level. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice suddenly gentle. "My name is Captain Dave. I'm the pilot. I'm so sorry we had that loud argument. That was all a very, very big mistake. It was the grown-ups being silly. Nobody is in trouble. Your daddy did nothing wrong. We're all going to London now to see the Queen's Palace. Is that okay?" Zoe, still clutching her colouring book, looked at her dad, who nodded. She gave the captain a small, shy nod. "Okay," the captain said, standing up. "Director, Dr. Thorne, we will be pushing back in 2 minutes." He retreated to the cockpit, the door sealing with a pneumatic hiss that sounded like a tomb closing. A moment later, Gregory Slater appeared. He was trembling. He stood near Marcus's seat, his eyes on the floor. "Director Thorne, Dr. Thorne," he whispered, his voice cracking. I am so sorry. What I did was wrong. I apologize. For my behavior. For everything. I am sorry." Marcus just looked at him for a long moment. He gave a single, curt nod. Defeated, Gregory Slater turned and walked on unsteady legs to the galley, where he stayed for the rest of the boarding procedures. The cabin door was closed. The plane finally pushed back from the gate. As they taxied to the runway, Jamal leaned over to his father. "So," Jamal whispered, a tiny grin on his face. "Deputy Director of Counterterrorism, huh?" "Eat your snacks, Jamal," Marcus replied. But Aaliyah, for the first time, let out a small, shaky laugh. The tension was broken. The power had shifted completely. The 7-hour flight to London was the most awkward, tense, and excruciatingly polite journey of Gregory Slater's life. He was, as the captain had ordered, a ghost. He served the first-class cabin, but he avoided the Thorns' cluster of seats, his face a mask of pale, clammy professionalism. Aaliyah and Marcus, wanting to shield Zoe from any more tension, pointedly made their requests to the other flight attendant in the cabin, a middle-aged woman named Beth, who had watched the entire confrontation with wide, horrified eyes. Beth was now almost too attentive, bringing Zoe extra ice cream with her meal, offering Dr. Thorne and Director Thorne endless refills of water and juice, and pointedly asking Jamal about his taste in music. Gregory, meanwhile, had to serve Caroline Vance. She too was a ghost. She didn't speak. She didn't make eye contact. She ate her meal, watched The Devil Wears Prada, and pointedly went to sleep, her cashmere wrap pulled up to her chin. The alliance between passenger and crew was broken, replaced by the mutual terror of their shared mistake. In the cockpit, Captain Macmillan was not relaxing. As soon as they reached 10,000 feet, he was on the cockpit's satellite communication system, typing out a long, detailed, and utterly panicked email. It wasn't just a flight report. It was a CYA document of epic proportions. He sent it directly to James Harding, the CEO of Globalis Air, to the airline's chief legal officer, and to the head of in-flight operations. The subject line was stark: urgent, security incident, civil rights violation, FLT 104, potential federal action. The body of the email laid out the facts in brutal, unvarnished detail. Flight attendant Gregory Slater, based on a passenger complaint from Caroline Vance, Million Miler, escalated a minor dispute with passengers in 1D, 1G, 2D, 2G. Slater and Vance accused the family of being aggressive and a security threat. Gate agent Susan Jenkins and captain, himself, followed procedure to remove the passengers. Passengers refused. Threatening arrest was made. Passenger in 1D identified himself as Deputy Director Marcus Thorne of the FBI Counter-Terrorism Division. This was, Macmillan typed, his fingers flying, a catastrophic failure of de-escalation by Mr. Slater, exacerbated by a false report from Ms. Vane, and a failure of my own command judgment in not investigating prior to acting. Director Thorne has explicitly mentioned racial profiling. He is, understandably, furious. He has stated he will be filing a formal complaint. We need our absolute best executive team to meet this flight at Heathrow. We are not in a customer service situation. We are in a federal crisis. He hit send. Within 20 minutes, Long before they had even reached the coast of Canada, he received a one-word reply from the CEO's personal account. Landed. For the next 6 hours, Marcus and Aaliyah tried to salvage the vacation. They watched a movie with Zoe, pointing out the London landmarks. Jamal put his headphones back on, but Marcus noticed he wasn't listening to music. He was typing. Likely, he was writing down every single detail of what happened, creating a perfect time-stamped record. Marcus smiled. My son. When the plane began its descent over a dark, sleeping Ireland, the atmosphere was thick. As the fasten seatbelt sign chimed, Captain Macmillan's voice came over the PA. It was the standard, "Welcome to London. Local time is 6:15 a.m." But there was a tremor in it. The landing was, as promised, smooth. The plane taxied to its gate at Terminal 3. "Folks," Captain Macmillan's voice came on again, "we ask that all passengers please remain seated, as we will have a representative of the airline boarding to speak to a passenger." Every head in first class swiveled to the thorns. The jet bridge docked. The ding sounded. The cabin door opened. But instead of the ground crew, a woman in an impeccably tailored black suit stepped on board. She had a severe haircut, a kind face, and an earpiece. She was flanked by 2 stoic-looking Heathrow security managers. She walked directly to Marcus's seat. "Director Thorne?" she said, her voice a calm, British-accented alto. "My name is Eleanor Bishop. I'm the UK Executive Director for Globalis Air. On behalf of our CEO, James Harding, I am here to offer our most profound and unreserved apologies." She looked at Aaliyah, Jamal, and Zoe. "To all of you, what happened at JFK was not just unacceptable. It was an appalling failure. It is not what our airline stands for." Gregory Slater, who had been waiting to do his goodbye speech, was frozen by the galley, watching his career end. "Ms. Bishop," Marcus said, beginning to unbuckle as the plane settled. "I appreciate you meeting us." "We have a private car waiting for you on the tarmac, sir," she said. "You will be bypassing customs and immigration. We have a diplomatic liaison waiting to process your passports. Your luggage is being collected personally and will be in the car." This was the full red carpet, "Please don't destroy us" treatment. "Thank you, Ms. Bishop," Marcus said, standing and helping Aaliyah with her coat. The family gathered their things. "This," Eleanor continued, "is not a gesture. This is an apology. Your entire trip, all airfare, has been refunded. Your return flight, whenever you choose to take it, will be on our private charter, if you'll accept it." "That won't be necessary," Marcus said, "but thank you." "Director Thorne," Eleanor said, stepping aside to let them into the aisle. "Mr. Slater is being dealt with. I assure you, Mr. Harding will be calling you personally today, at your convenience." Marcus nodded. He shepherded his family to the open door. As he was about to step onto the jet bridge, he paused and looked back at Eleanor Bishop. "Ms. Bishop," he said. "Yes, Director?" "I want you to pass a message to Mr. Harding. Tell him I appreciate the car. Tell him I appreciate the refund. And tell him that as soon as I am checked into my hotel, I will be filing a formal, detailed complaint with the United States Department of Transportation, citing clear violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. And I will be personally requesting that my office, the FBI, in conjunction with the DHS, conduct a full review of Globalis Air's security protocols, their employee training, and their adherence to federal civil rights compliance." Eleanor Bishop's professional, calm face dissolved. She went utterly white. This was not a lawsuit. A lawsuit was about money. This was an investigation. This was about everything. This threatened their government contracts, their landing slots, their very existence. "Director, please," she stammered. "Have a good day, Miss Bishop," Marcus said. He turned, took Zoe's hand, and led his family off the plane, leaving the executive, the disgraced crew, and a cabin full of stunned passengers behind. The fallout was not immediate, but it was total. The Thorn incident, as it became known internally at Globalis Air, was a bomb that detonated in the corporate headquarters, and the shrapnel hit everyone involved. First, Gregory Slater. He was not allowed to work the return flight. As Eleanor Bishop had promised, he was met by Globalis corporate security and a stern-faced HR executive at Heathrow. He was interviewed for 2 hours, during which his story crumbled. Faced with Jamal's video evidence, which the airline had requested and Elia had gladly provided, and the written testimony of 3 other first-class passengers who confirmed the Thorns had been quiet and that Gregory was the aggressor, his case was hopeless. He was suspended without pay and flown back to New York in a middle seat in economy. Upon landing at JFK, he was met by another HR team and was fired for cause, specifically for gross misconduct, endangerment of passengers, and discriminatory behavior violating company policy and federal law. His FAA license was flagged with a formal complaint from the airline itself, making it nearly impossible for him to be hired by another major carrier. He lost his job, his career, and his unearned sense of superiority. Second, Caroline Vance. As a passenger, she couldn't be fired. But karma has other methods. Globalis Air's legal department sent her a certified letter. It formally notified her that she had been permanently banned from Globalis Air and all its partner airlines for life, citing her filing of a false, malicious, and discriminatory security report against a fellow passenger, resulting in a significant operational delay and a security investigation. The letter also reserved the right to pursue her civilly for the financial damages of the delay and the subsequent federal fines. While they never did, the threat was clear. But the real karma was social. Her husband, Philip, who had been silent, was a partner at a major New York law firm that did millions in business with the federal government. When the story inevitably leaked, more on that later, Philip's partners were not amused. Caroline Vance's status as a million-miler was replaced by the status of pariah. Third, Susan Jenkins and Captain Macmillan. Susan, the gate agent, was demoted. She wasn't the instigator, but she was the enforcer. She had failed to de-escalate, failed to investigate, and had threatened a family with arrest without cause. She was pulled from her high-profile terminal manager position and sent for mandatory, multi-week de-escalation and bias training. Captain Macmillan faced a formal review board. He had saved himself by his actions after the reveal, but he was formally reprimanded for failing to control his crew and for escalating to a removal threat without gathering facts. He was grounded for 2 months and forced to co-author a new training module for all pilots on de-escalation and federal passenger rights. He kept his job, but his pristine record was forever tarnished. Fourth, and finally, Globalis Air. This was the hard karma. Director Thorne was true to his word. The Department of Transportation launched a massive investigation. 6 months later, the story leaked to the Washington Post. The headline was brutal. Globalis Air fined record $2.8 million for discriminatory removal attempt of FBI director's family. The story was a PR nightmare. The stock price tanked. The CEO, James Harding, had to issue a groveling public apology, not just to the Thorns, but to the nation. But the real blow was the consent decree. To avoid further federal prosecution, Globalis Air was forced into a court-monitored agreement. They had to completely overhaul their entire company-wide training on racial bias, de-escalation, and passenger rights. This multi-million-dollar program would be monitored by a federally appointed, independent auditor for 5 years. Every new hire, from baggage handler to CEO, had to pass it. The Thorn incident became the case study, a permanent, expensive, and humiliating reminder of what happens when prejudice and power tripping go unchecked. The Thorns finished their vacation. It was quiet, a bit subdued, but they were together. They flew home on a different airline in first class, paid for by Globalis. They never sought the spotlight. But as Marcus explained to Jamal, we had a choice. We could let it go, or we could make sure it doesn't happen to someone who doesn't have a badge to show. The victory wasn't sweet, but it was just. It was the cold, hard, satisfying slam of karma hitting its mark. The consequences for Globalis Air were not just a fine. They were a systemic shock. The Thorn incident, as it became known in leaked memos, forced a reckoning that echoed through the entire industry. Real change is slow, and it's often paid for by the humiliation of people like the Thorns. But it does happen. The next time a passenger felt the sting of prejudice, there was a new rule book. There was a new training module. And there was the lingering, expensive memory of what happened when an airline messed with the wrong family, and the hard, cold hand of karma hit back. Hard. Thank you for listening to this real-life drama. If this story resonated with you, and you believe that accountability matters, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of drama, twists, and karma. Click that bell icon so you never miss an upload. What did you think of the captain's reaction when he saw the badge? What would you have done in that situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.